Hi, this is Bruce Davis, president of Public Progress. But today I'm actually talking to you as a former school trustee in the City of Toronto, the Toronto District School Board. I was a trustee from 2000 until 2010. 10 years of my life I gave up as a school trustee, fighting for families and children and fighting to improve public education. I'm here at 20th Street School. This is where my kids went to school. This is where my career started. And I just want to take you on a little bit of a tour. This isn't so much to brag, but it's to give you some idea of the role that school trustees play and why they're so vital. The first role of a school trustee is to represent your constituents. So every 4 years, you go out and you knock on doors and you talk to people who are eligible to vote about what they want in their public education system. That's people who have kids in the system. It's people who pay taxes but don't have kids in the system. And it's vital that people support public education even if they don't have children in the system. It's a public good. It is absolutely essential that we have good quality public education in every neighborhood for every child. And that's the role of the trustee, to represent their constituents, to make sure that public education in Toronto is exceptional. And there are three main roles, at least the way I saw it when I was a school trustee. The first role is to work with individual families and children who are unable to figure out how the system works. And I used to help parents and children navigate if they had a special education issue, if they had an optional attendance issue, if they were trying to figure out how to get into French immersion. I remember the first week I was on the job, a really sweet young girl who had a special need was waiting to get an assisted device. It's like a computer that could help her with her learning. And she'd been waiting for months and months and months and languishing on some list. And I was the school trustee. I picked up the phone. I called someone at the head office. And within 2 days, this young woman, this young girl, had her assisted device. She was back in school. She was so excited. And that was the role at that time of a school trustee. I used to actually do home visits. I would actually go visit with parents and students, kids who were truant. I would actually call students to get them out of bed in the morning. Now, not every school trustee did that, but one of the key roles of a school trustee, at least when I was there, was fighting for parents and children who were trying to figure out this very, very complicated system. The second big role for school trustees is actually working with school communities. And I'm just walking up 20th Street here, and when I get to the end of the street, it's Lakeshore Collegiate, and I have a story to tell. Actually, I have a really sweet story to tell about Rob Ford. Before he was mayor, he was a city councillor, and I do have a story that I want to share about Rob Ford. But let me just pause here. I'm just walking up the street. Every single house on this street pays education property tax. In Toronto, this is a bit of a side thing. In Toronto, 1.6 billion approximately is levied for schools on the property tax. That's why we need school trustees, to make sure that that money is properly spent. And if they're doing a lousy job, by the way, just kick them out. You don't replace the whole school system. You just kick out the bums. If they're lame, kick them out. That's why we have elections. But every single person on the street pays education property tax. In Toronto, it's about 1.6 billion. In fact, 48% of Toronto's school budget is paid by local property tax. Only 40% of Toronto District School Board's budget comes from the province. Remember that. Because when the minister says he wants to take over Toronto schools, he basically wants the money. He wants to control $1.6 billion of education property tax that comes from Toronto taxpayers so that he can control it and do whatever the hell he wants with it. I'm going to pause here in front of Lakeshore Collegiate Institute on Birmingham at Kipling in South Etobicoke. And I love this school. Two of my kids went to this school. I was active here in the school all the time, working with teachers and the principal. Remember I said there's three roles for school trustees? The first role is working with parents and children to help them to navigate the school system. The second key role is working with school communities to make sure that the school dynamic and the parents and the children and the staff are able to thrive. And we want schools like this not just to get by. We want them to be firing on all cylinders. So when I was at Lakeshore Collegiate, I coached boys soccer, I coached football, but the football story is one that I love to tell. Lakeshore Collegiate did not have a football team, or didn't for years and years and years. And I actually went to see Councillor Rob Ford. And I asked Rob, and I said, I want to start a football team back at Lakeshore Collegiate. He was so excited, man. He loved it because he was a big football coach in high school. And he actually walked me through how to start up a football team at Lakeshore Collegiate. I took a lot of his ideas. I went out and raised the money. We started a football team at Lakeshore Collegiate. But that's not all that we did. We completely revitalized the campus. We built a 4-pad hockey arena. We built a dome. And you can see tonight, the field is packed. Every single night, this sports field at Lakeshore Collegiate is packed with kids, with parents, clinics, and it's a retractable dome. So later on in the year, they'll put the dome up. So it'll be running year round and the school gets access to it. And the 4-pad arena, which is just at the end of the school, is actually on school board property. And that's where the Leafs practice. And the kids, TDSB kids, get 500 hours of free ice time a year, basically in a world-class facility that they can use. That would not have happened without Councillor Grimes and myself working together. I was the school trustee, he was the city councillor at the time. That would never have happened. Okay, I'm on the other side of the sports field, and I just wanted to show you this other building behind me. This is the old arena, the Memorial Arena, which was decommissioned when the Lakeshore Lions built the 4-pad arena across the campus. As the school trustee, I worked with local groups to fight to have this repurposed. And Humber College came along and ended up turning this old arena into a digital media center for Humber College. They leased it from the school board for 25 years. But there's a nice little part of this. As we were going through this entire campus revitalization, I used to have regular update meetings with the school committee, with local students to get their feedback. And there was one student who was a pain in the ass, and she just kept getting up at all the meetings and giving me grief. There weren't enough facilities for youth. We're doing all these big things, big plans, and there wasn't anything for youth. So we actually ended up putting a community gym in the back of Humber College here. It's interesting because that community gym, it's such good quality that the Canadian national basketball team uses it for their training camps. And that gym is accessible and available for community use. And by the way, that pain in the ass kid who was at Lakeshore Collegiate, I think she was like 16 at the time, was Amber Morley, who's now a city councillor, deputy city mayor, doing an amazing job. Anyway, a school trustee goes into the school, goes into the neighborhood, meets with people, talks to them. All of the families behind here, I met with them. In fact, one night before we did the dome, before we did the 4-pad, before we did any of this, I actually had a meeting in a living room with about 25 neighbors. That's what school trustees do. And there's no way in hell the Minister of Education, even if he's God, there's no way in hell the Minister of Education can do that kind of grassroots consultation and work with a school community to revitalize a campus like this. It just cannot happen. I know the minister has all this worldly experience, but man, there's nothing like a school trustee meeting with local people in their homes, getting their feedback. The other thing I just want to point out, I've talked a lot about Lakeshore Collegiate. I'm super, super proud of this school and the academics there, the woodworking, the automotive. My son, now a PhD, Dr. Matthew Davis, came out of the science program here at Lakeshore Collegiate. He's now an environmental scientist. My daughter is active in international human rights issues. She came through Lakeshore Collegiate and she took a lot of her world studies here. This is where she got the bug. Anyway, I love this school. Anyway, enough about Lakeshore. As a school trustee, I used to meet with school councils every month. Sometimes I would go to 2 or 3 school councils in a night to update them, to find out what was happening. So it wasn't just Lakeshore Collegiate. I would go to every one of my 20 schools, sometimes 4 times a year, sometimes 6 times a year. I would try and get to them every time I could. It took a lot of time, but it was valuable. And the cool thing I learned, sitting around the table with parents at a school council, they would scrape and save and work their backsides off to raise $10,000 in a fun fair. So when you go down to the school board meetings downtown, you gotta watch your pennies, because the parents you see every single month at their school council, they're scrimping and saving. They're doing potlucks. They're doing fundraisers. So you can't be stupid about how you spend money. So let me just repeat this again. If your trustees are lame, get rid of them. Or if they're spending money like idiots, get rid of them. But that doesn't mean you have to get rid of the system. Anyway, the third key facet for a school trustee, in my opinion, is the downtown stuff. Policies, budgets, strategic decisions, hiring. We used to hire all the senior staff. We used to hire the superintendents. We would actually, it's required under the Education Act that we actually hire teachers. So school trustees, every month, we get a slate of new hires. Twice a year, 3 times a year, they would come to us with recommendations in terms of where principals should be moved. And we actually had to review that and say, is that the best fit for this school at this time? Man, that is powerful. That is so important. I tried to get parents involved in the hiring process, at least at a system level, so the parents could be part of the process of hiring the principal pool or the superintendent's pool. I wasn't always successful, but playing a role on the downtown issues is important. You know, I actually think the local stuff is more important, but the downtown stuff, expanding French immersion across the system, fighting anti-racism, making sure that our staff have the resources they need and that our children and families have the resources and they're allocated properly and fairly across the system. Those are big decisions. In 2001, when I started my career as a school trustee, we made $5,000 a year. When I finished, I was chair of the school board, and as chair of the school board, I made $33,000 a year. So nobody was getting rich being a school trustee, and you work your ass off. Imagine a system where there are no school trustees to assist schools, to manage the money, to help children and families to navigate the system. But wait a minute, our library system has a board of directors, our police services have a board of directors, the zoo has a board of directors, the arena here actually has a board of directors, but not the school board. The school board doesn't deserve its own board of directors. The school board, people who pay 48% of the school board budget don't deserve to have a school trustee. All of those decisions should be made by Queen's Park or by a director of education. Anyway, 2001, I was one of the new school trustees and we were forced to make $80 million in budget cuts. This was the Mike Harris government. And we worked for 6 months to try and reconcile the budget, and we weren't able to make it work. And the school board was divided at that time. 11 trustees refused to make any more cuts, and 11 trustees said, you know what, we have to make these cuts, otherwise the province is going to step in. But when I was a school trustee, when I first got elected, I made a promise that I would never, ever cut programs for children, ever. And I did not care. And the weird thing is, the Education Act at the time actually made trustees personally liable for any budget deficit. So if we were $80 million short, the trustees who voted against the balanced budget were personally liable for that $80 million. Well, you can imagine before I became a school trustee, all of my assets got put into my wife's name, but that's another story because there's no way in hell I was going to let the province take my house. Anyway, I was one of the 11 school trustees who fought to not make budget cuts. And I remember those trustees, Sheila Carey-Maher, Irene Atkinson, Paula Fletcher, Kathleen Wynne, Shelley Carroll. There were a lot of them, and they were tough cookies. Man, if you had to have someone fighting for your children, you wanted those trustees fighting for you. But actually, the toughest school trustee that I can recall ever in my career was Nellie Pedro. Nellie Pedro was the toughest trustee. She wanted to know from the staff how much they were paying for a can of paint. The staff had promised one of her schools an extension onto one of her schools when there was an amalgamation of two schools. She fought tooth and nail to make damn sure that her school got the extension. Man, you did not want to get in the way of Nellie Pedro. Anyway, there were some remarkable school trustees. Actually, there were a lot of trustees who were exceptional. I didn't always agree with them. Jerry Gershon is an amazing woman, great school trustee. Jerry brought forward, the school board created a new course for the study of genocide and crimes against humanity. The TDSB actually created a high school course on genocide and crimes against humanity. Jerry spearheaded that. So it included the Holocaust, it included the Holodomor, it included the Khmer Rouge. And that course went on to be taught throughout TDSB schools. That course is now taught across Canada. That's because one school trustee brought it forward, championed it, and we supported her. I gotta tell you, we need that course. We need that course today. Sorry about that. Jerry and I didn't always get along, but she was a great champion for her community and for public education, and we worked on many issues together. I should let you know how that story ends. So 11 trustees voted not to make budget cuts. 11 trustees voted to make budget cuts. This is back in 2001. The province ended up stepping in, appointing a supervisor, Paul Christie. He was in place for 3 years. He wasn't able to make the budget cuts that the province insisted. He didn't cut the swimming pools. He didn't cut lunchroom supervisors. He didn't cut the music programs and the arts programs. He didn't do that. So even though the province stepped in, it turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory for them. Anyway, there were many other amazing school trustees who came up through the school system. Michael Coteau, my dear friend, now a member of parliament. He was a member of provincial parliament. He and I fighting for anti-racism issues. James Pasternak, now a city councillor. He led the fight for an Afrocentric school. Gary Crawford, who went on to city council, and he was a provincial Conservative candidate. Gary was always championing the arts. He was a visual artist himself, and he made sure that TDSB art collection, we have an amazing art collection at the TDSB. He made sure that it was properly managed and cared for, and he fought for his area of Scarborough. So many other school trustees. I'm thinking of my good friend Josh Matlow, who's always trouble, who's always stirring things up, but he was an advocate for his families and for his schools. Anyway, the minister, I guess, wants people to believe they'd be better off without school trustees, that the school system would be better off without school trustees, I call bullshit. Honestly, I call bullshit. School trustees champion families and children. School trustees work with their school communities to make sure that they're not left behind, that they get the resources that they need. School trustees have to manage the system and the hiring of the staff and the strategic priorities. And as I've said before, if your trustee's not doing a good job, kick them out. Run for school board yourself. If they're lame, get rid of them. But you don't have to get rid of the school system. We should be fighting for school trustees now because we need school trustees to fight for us. Anyway, my email address is in the message thingy below. I'm always happy to talk to folks about public education.